You've invited Hezbollah, Hamas, the IRA to Parliament in the past. You've called them your friends. Is there any terrorist group beyond the pale for a cosy chat on the House of Commons terrace with you?
I invited a number of groups to discuss the Middle East into a meeting in Parliament and welcomed everyone to that meeting as friends because they were coming in prepared to have a serious discussion. You do not bring about peace anywhere in the world without talking to people who you may not agree with. Look at how we dealt with Northern Ireland. Look how what is now being dealt with in Colombia, where the FARC are in negotiations with the government of Colombia in Cuba, and look at the whole process in the Middle East. If you just put people into silos and say, I'm not going to talk to you because I don't agree with you, you will never bring about peace.
In what way are you proud to have Hezbollah as your friends, the supporters of the Assad regime?
I have met them. I don't agree with many of their strategies or policies. I obviously don't agree with the violence that goes with it, but there has to be the bringing out together a peace process. You also have to look at the way in which Israel has, how should I put it, bombed the Gaza Strip into it's an appalling,
I'm talking about Hezbollah.
Mess. Wait a minute, it's an appalling mess, and so there has to be a peace process that brings about reconstruction and brings about reconciliation.
But you
have to talk to people.
On Northern Ireland, you didn't just deal with Sinn Féin. You dealt with the IRA 3 weeks after the Brighton bomb, in which the IRA had tried to destroy the democratically elected government of this country. You invited 2 convicted IRA terrorists to the House of Commons.
They were former prisoners who had come out of prison, women who'd come out of prison, came to Parliament, actually in a meeting that had been arranged long before, to talk about prison conditions and rehabilitation of prisoners.
They were IRA.
Is there anything wrong with that since they had a spent conviction?
They had their organisation had just tried to blow up the British government.
The whole history.
Did you not think about that?
Of course I thought about it, and
you still invited them in?
And I wanted a peace process. That's why I maintained a level of contact with Sinn Féin.
Hamas and Hezbollah your friends?
What I did was spoke at a meeting in which I said I wanted all people involved in the Middle East issue to come together and be able to have a discussion, to be able to discuss. Can you allow me to finish? Do you mind?
Yeah, but I asked you a question and you're ignoring it.
No, I'm not ignoring the question. If you'd give me a minute, I'll answer it. The point is this. Listen for a minute, if you don't mind. I spoke at a meeting about the Middle East crisis in Parliament, and there were people there from Hezbollah, and I said I welcomed our friends from Hezbollah to have a discussion and a debate. And I said I wanted Hamas to be part of that debate. I have met Hamas in Lebanon, and I've met Hezbollah in this country in Lebanon. I've also met...
So are they your friends or not?
Can I finish?
Are they your friends or not?
Can I finish? I've also met...
Well, you can't if it's a long answer.
Look, the issue is this. You are not prepared to discuss the whole issue of the Middle East. You're not prepared to discuss the wider question. Rate of income tax ought to be set on the ability to pay it, and at the moment the top rate is too low. I would go 50% and possibly slightly higher. But
Andy Burham, you've now admitted that Labour spent too much in the run-up to the crash after all these years of growth. But you did spend the last 5 years arguing the opposite. Why did you change your mind, or are you just a slow learner?
Well, I wasn't leader of the party or shadow chancellor in that period.
But you have Jeremy Corbyn in your shadow cabinet?
I don't know if he wants a job. Maybe not shadow chancellor on the back of what he's just said, but I might be open to listen.
In your shadow
cabinet? I think he said things in this contest that are important and people have responded to clearly. So I think the Labour Party's got to come back together after this leadership.
Can I finish?
You told us on Sunday you wanted Jeremy Corbyn in your shadow cabinet.
I didn't say that.
You did say that because I was watching. Oh, you were joking.
Well, I said I didn't expect to have... Jeremy had just done a whole thing about how the deficit doesn't really... No, definitely not. He's making a very important contribution to
make. Why would you joke about it? I mean, it's a simple question.
But I said that after Jeremy had said a long thing about the deficit, which I didn't agree with, that I wouldn't necessarily have him as shadow chancellor.
Are you seriously...
The Westminster bubble, when you are a full-time, fully paid-up citizen of the Westminster bubble.
Not.
You spent your whole working life in the Westminster bubble.
Absolutely not. I am one of few MPs who represents the place where I grew up, and I've always lived there. I've never spent my weekends down here, and when you do that, it has a habit of rooting you in the real world, because I go back and I go out with the people I played football with, the people I went to school with. That is me.
You've always worked from a mile from where we are.
I visit.
Tell me one job you've had that's not the Westminster bubble.
I worked for a newspaper. I worked for a publishing company before I came into politics.
For how long?
Pardon? For about 4 years. before I came into
What was the
politics.
publishing company?
Baltic Publishing, you must know. And
Your first job was working for Tessa Job.
Oh, it wasn't.
As a
You've not been there
researcher.
doing your research, Andrew. Do your research properly.
You've
But you
always
know-
been in the bubble.
No, because I visit the bubble on a regular basis, but I always go back to my constituency, and that is important. Too many people.
Every
in politics.
MP goes back.
Well,
to
I am the candidate for change because I led calls for Labour to change its position. Harriet Harman originally said that we would abstain completely on the bill. And I said I couldn't do that because this was a bill which would put children into poverty, a bill that unravelled all of the things we did on tax credits to support people in work. And no, we didn't, because a motion was tabled which said Labour doesn't give the bill a second reading, and that was as a result of that question.
Do you regret abstaining now?
No, it was the right thing to do. In terms of not causing a rift in the party, I tried to move the party to a stronger position, but having come to a position and having moved its position, it was right to support it.
Back in Britain, a £23,000 benefits cap. Yes or no? Andy, yes or no? Yes or no?
No.
Yes or no?
No. I think that's, Kevin, I think that's a little unfair because there are other wait.
It's what people want to know. It's what people want to know.
Well, if you let me say, let me just explain why I think it's unfair. Because
Is that yes or no?
there are other changes that they're going to produce alongside the
Do
plan.
you think a benefits cap at £23,000 is fair or
Depends
not?
what
Yes
else
or
they
no?
do. In principle, let me answer your question. In principle, it's not right that people should get more in benefits than most people in my constituency get in wages. So I am not setting my face against changes to the benefits system, but it depends how they do it, and I'm not going to give you an answer like that on the question that is complicated.
You're not going to give me an answer that will be asked on a doorstep.
I think just respond to what Nigel Farage said initially about are there any circumstances that you could consider voting no?
Well, there aren't, because I always will believe that being in Europe is better for jobs in our country. Our prosperity is bound up with being in Europe.
Yvette Cooper, you once said that, and I quote, "The difficult thing in politics can be sometimes be the earnestness all the time." So what are you going to do to lighten the mood of the Labour Party?
You want me to tell a joke? Because there's a challenge to me to tell a joke. The trouble is, part of the reason that we end up being earnest is because actually there's so many things to do and so many things. I'm not doing this because I want to be something. I'm doing this because I want to do something. You're right. That means there's always a risk of being earnest. It's because there's so many problems to face.
Surely you have to inspire, and Tony Blair did that. I mean, very few political leaders ever can. Can you seriously look me in the eye and say that in this contest you've inspired anybody?
Well, we've got a challenge to inspire people.
I meant you personally.
Yeah, well, and every one of us. And, I would love to inspire people about the high-tech digital jobs of the future, which I think is really exciting, about how we can compete with India and China again, be at the forefront of the digital revolution like we were at the forefront of the industrial revolution, how we have a childcare revolution, how we can stop families being stretched and strained to fit round work and instead change work to fit round family life, and how we can just, that historic mission of ending child poverty in our lifetime, so parents aren't forced to go to food banks to put a hot meal on the table. I think those are inspiring Labour things. Now,
We should ideally we had a small deficit just before the financial crisis, and I do.
Well, hold on. We had according to the OECD, we had the highest structural deficit in Europe, other than Greece.
The current deficit at the time, just before the crisis, was 0.6%. As you know, it wasn't the deficit that caused the financial crisis. It was the financial crisis that caused the deficit.
No one is saying that. No one is saying that the deficit caused the crisis. What we're saying, the argument we're getting you to address, is that after 15 years of economic growth, we still had the highest structural deficit in Europe, bar Greece. Was that sensible?
Andrew, as I've said, ideally the small deficit would have been a surplus. However, the reason that we had the deficit at that time was because tax revenues didn't come in. I think there is a big problem about what happened with tax forecasting, about what should have been done about tax avoidance.
No, I'm talking about the years 2006, 2007. Tax revenues were booming.
But hang on
you
a
got
second,
£84 billion a year alone from the City of London.
Actually,
they were booming.
No, the tax revenues were lower
number that was forecast, and there was considerable over-optimism in the forecast. But the point is that the point that Andy and others have made is that somehow what was happening with public spending made us too weak to deal with the financial crisis that it happened. And as you know, debt in fact was really low because of the surpluses that Labour had run in the past. Because debt was so low, we were able to...
You were adding to debt.
Let me finish the answer first.
You added to the national debt.
We were able to...
Excuse me, Yvette Cooper, you've just said something
Andrew,
that's factually not true.
But
debt
Andrew.
rose under the last Labour government. It went from 300 billion to 500 billion before the crash.
But as you know, debt as a proportion of our national income...
But I understand that everybody wants a yes or no, but the legislation... We need to reform... We need to reform... We do need to reform the legislation. I'm arguing, I think, for stronger reforms to it than other people, but I do think we need to argue for those reforms.
Right. Yes or no? Or...
As it stands, I think it's unfair. We've got to argue for reforms.
All right. Can I put you down as a no? Can I put you down as a no? Or would you prefer to be a yes?
It's, you know...
It's an unfair question.
We've got...
It's an unfair question.
I know, but there is a... Well, in the end, it's our job in the Labour Party to try and argue for change and to try and make changes, whether that's in Parliament or anywhere else.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to have to do.
Right, anyway.
And that rebalancing of our economy is vital for the future and a big part of this campaign.
You haven't quite answered my question about whether or not you're in favour of cuts to the government budget to deal with the deficit.
We need to balance the books and live within our means,
So,
but in a better, fairer way. Look, when we're seeing what George Osborne is proposing, I'll come back to you, Andrew, and I'll come back.
Okay,
I'll be very happy to be back here.
I saw fighting for the policy that migrant workers from the rest of the EU should have their tax credits removed, at least for 4 years. Do you approve of that policy?
There is a big question about that. But this is about something far greater. This is about...
No, but that is my question.
We do have to deal with the issue of people who come here to work and that they must be working and not claiming benefits. But this is about something much bigger, Andrew. It is about the future of our country and our place workers in the world.
I know, but I need to ask you specifically, are you in favour of removing tax credits for migrant workers coming to this country?
That's definitely something we should look at, but this is a far bigger debate, Andrew.
Yeah,
are we really going to spend this period in the run-up to the referendum discussing whether it's about tax credits for Polish workers to stand up for Britain's national interests? That will always come first if I'm leader of our
Very
party.
few politicians sit in that chair and say, I don't want to stand up for Britain's national interests.
But David Cameron isn't.
I'm asking you a very straight question about what has become the key issue between him and the rest of the EU on tax credits.
He has allowed this to define whether or not Britain remains part of Europe. That is a profound lack of leadership on his behalf, because he is more concerned about internal political management than the future of the country. That will not happen if I'm leader of the Labour Party.
I'm going to carry on because I still want to know whether you're in favour of this policy of removing tax credits from migrant workers or not.
Look, I'm in favour of free movement of labour, but not
every
free
time I
movement
ask you one thing, you shift us on to another policy.
But I'm trying to
just
set
on this
out...
question of tax credits being limited to 2 children. Do you think that's right or wrong?
Listen, I've said we need a different approach.
So it's wrong?
We need a different approach to what
so does that mean
the government set out. I want to provide a properly costed approach to what we should be doing.
I still don't know whether that's right or wrong. Okay. Just say right or wrong.
Because I think that we should be, you can't really reform welfare unless you're putting the support in that people need to get the childcare to go to work, that you have tough action to really improve wages, and on the housing benefit side, unless you're building more homes. We need a different approach to that. Look, we've just come through a terrible defeat. People rightly want an opposition and a leader who will set out a costed alternative approach. We've only just got...
OK, I get it. We'll get your plans in due course.
You'd be on a platform with David Cameron making the yes case?
Well, look, we don't know yet what package we're going to get.
So there might be circumstances in which you'd argue that we should come out of Europe.
Yeah, I mean, David Cameron has been very clear that he rules nothing out. If our European partners were to simply block us and say, look, we can't do any of this stuff, we can't meet any of your demands,
you would argue for us to be out.
This relationship between Britain and the European Union, then of course we've got to keep all our options.
The other side is you would stay in under all circumstances, and you want an ever deeper, closer union.
That's not
more migration coming into.
Great negotiating
I want a reformed Europe, but there aren't circumstances that I would argue for us to be out of Europe.
Can I finish?